my dear God. Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. Do you want some water or something? You want me to
I
go
have
get
my water
Okay,
and
good.
coffee.
I actually have a staff interview at 10.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Thank you very
Good
much.
luck.
Okay.
Oh, go start video. Oh, record.
Yeah, I've recorded.
Oh, you did?
Oh, good. Garen is on.
Okay, so I'm gonna give it to Eva because she wants to look.
Can't she
She wants to join. Oh, Caroline, I'm sorry. You know what? I need to take a Zoom
do it?
class.
I mean, you know what? We figured it out, but I don't understand why it was wonky like that.
Yeah,
And that would help both of us if you want to take a Zoom class.
I do. I really do.
Now, you're going to mute yourself.
All right. Hello, Adele.
Hello, Anna. How are you?
Hi,
Oh,
Garen.
Hi. Tanastaline.
Oh, Tenastali. Very glad to hear my mother tongue. Tenastali. Thank you.
Inbox.
Okay, you want to come for you? Okay, good.
Yes, it's working. Thank you very much.
The regular thing. We'll
Yeah,
just
I
talk
didn't
about-
even print out the
Yeah.
link.
Tenastali Ato Ermias.
Tenastali. Nice to meet
Didn't
you.
know.
Dananing. Oh, you speak Amharic?
Finish.
Wow, wow. I am so impressed. Tinish. Okay,
At one time, I could do much better.
okay. Wow. So you live in Ethiopia sometime?
Yes,
How you
yes.
learn?
I was a Peace Corps teacher at Medani Alam School in Addis.
Oh, Medani Alam School in Addis Ababa.
Yes. And
Okay.
then I was also at the American Center in Addis, the U.S. Information Service.
That was in Wemazakir, if I'm not wrong.
Well, I after the Peace Corps, I went into the diplomatic service.
Interesting.
We
Are you-
lived there again in the late 60s and then 30 years later, 2 years in the 90s.
Uh-huh.
And we spent 2 weeks there in 2016 visiting.
Visiting where? To the north, south, or
Well, we drove all over with a friend, but we stayed in Addis.
in Addis? Okay, okay. So I'm sure you see a lot of changes in the
Oh,
past
wow.
30 years.
What a change.
Addis it's changed, transformed, I would say.
And the Addis Ababa, the air had always been so beautiful, but it was not beautiful in 2012. It was
Yeah,
very
unfortunately.
full of soot and dirt from those little, what do you call them? What are
Tuk-tuk,
they
yeah.
called, Dev?
We
forgot.
call them bajaj.
Okay.
The small three-wheel motorbike.
Yes.
We call them bajaj in Ethiopia. Yeah. Oh, it was really an honor to to meet someone who has been to my country and knows what was happening during the 60s, I think, in the reign of the emperor. And I know that most foreigners has been go back to their countries during the communist regime when the emperor was overthrown. Yeah.
We managed to avoid Mengistu.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very unfortunate transition of power. I mean, it was hijacked. It wasn't, the change was needed and expected because monarch was for long. So, but unfortunately it hijacked and in the wrong hands, in my opinion. Okay, I think it's time to start the presentation. Everyone ready?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, I might have some technical difficulties because I am new to this Zoom sharing my presentation. So if it takes a little bit longer, understand me. So my name is Ermias Katama. I born and raised in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And I worked as a teacher before I changed my profession in tourism. And it's my pleasure to give some introduction about Ethiopian history. So Ethiopian history is not short because Ethiopia is one of the oldest countries in the world. The history is dated back at least 3,000. Hello, Naomi?
Yeah.
Can you show me how I go to the next page?
You should be able to start it. Stop reading.
I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. Now it's working. So for those of you who never been to Ethiopia or never heard of Ethiopia, Ethiopia is a country located in the Horn of Africa, as you can see in the slide. Ethiopia is located in the Horn, east of Africa, near to the Middle East. And the bigger map also shows where Ethiopia is situated in the globe. We share border with Eritrea in the north. Once was part of Ethiopia, but became independent in 1993. And we have Djibouti, the small Djibouti in the east, and we share the longest border with our neighbor Somalia, and Kenya in the south, and Sudan's in the west. Now Sudan's become two countries, South Sudan and Sudan. So in the west, we share border with this country. So we have 5 neighboring countries. So before I enter into about the introduction history of Ethiopia, I will give you some basic or general informations about the geographical features of Ethiopia. So Ethiopia has a major geographical feature, what is called the Great Rift Valley. The Great Rift Valley is a long parallel faulting that happened 2 million years ago during the tertiary period of the Cenozoic era that stretched all the way from Jordan, Middle East, all the way to Mozambique. So as you can see in the picture, in the future, maybe the East Africa, parts of Ethiopia, Somalia, parts of Kenya, up to Mozambique, would become a subcontinent because it is very low. One of the lowest place we have is the Dynamical Depression in Ethiopia. That is 120 meters below sea level. And we have the Samian Mountain that we normally called it Western Massif, or the Western Plateau and Southern Plateau. So we have the mountains in the east, southeast and west north, it bisected by the Great Rift Valley. And we also have the Central Plateau with a number of rivers. One of the longest river we have in Ethiopia is Blue Nile, that I'm sure most of you are aware of. The Blue Nile is the longest river in the world, more than 4,000 miles. That flows from the northern parts of Ethiopia, crossing border to Sudan, meets with the White Nile in Khartoum. Together they flow to Egypt, finally ends up to the Mediterranean Sea. I'll be back later at the end of my presentation about the Blue Nile, because the current affairs we have about the Grand Renaissance Dam that Ethiopia is building between Ethiopia and Sudan border. And after that, I would like to say something about the climates of Ethiopia. So Ethiopia is very close to the equator, and our neighboring countries experienced a very extreme heat, very hot. But when it comes to Ethiopia, we experience at least 3 different climatic zones. And the highlands are experiencing a very moderate climate because of the lofty altitudes. For instance, Addis Ababa, the capital, is situated in elevation that is about 8,000 feet, if I am right, because as you know, in Ethiopia, we use meters, not feet. So I have to make the calculation before my presentation. So Addis Ababa is situated approximately at 8,000 feet. And so the northern and southeast highland regions experience a very temperate, mild temperate weather. I would say like the temperature is between 65 to 78 or 80 Fahrenheit. You use here Fahrenheit. And we have a place called the Dynamical Depression, one of the lowest places in the world, which is 120 meters below sea level. There we experience a very extreme temperature, which is about, I would say, up to 55 degrees Celsius, which is more than 120 Fahrenheit. And day and nights are constant in length in Ethiopia because we are close to the equator. And in Ethiopia, we have our own timing. We count time different than the Western. In Ethiopia, the new day starts in the morning when the sun rises. So because the day and night lengths have constant we start counting. When you say 7 here in the Western, we call it 1. That is the day starts because of the equal lengths of the day and nights. Okay, if I give you this basic information about the country, let me add about the size of the country before I enter into the history of Ethiopia. I know I have a very limited time, and the history of Ethiopia is not small that can be covered in such a short time, but I'll try to give you a complete idea. So the capital city of Ethiopia is called Addis Ababa, which means new flower, and it is situated in the center of the country. And the population of Ethiopia is now estimated 120 million. That makes Ethiopia the second highest population in Africa, next to Nigeria. And the size of the country is 1.6 times bigger than the size of Texas, almost twice bigger than Texas, for the sake of comparison. And I already mentioned about the geographical features and the climate. So now I start to talk about the history of Ethiopia. So for the sake of convenience, I classified the history of Ethiopia into 6 major categories. That is the pre-recorded history, the ancient history, Middle Age, the Gondaran period, modern history, and reforms. So let's start with the pre-recorded. The pre-recorded or prehistory in Ethiopia. So Ethiopia is known as cradle of mankind. So why is Ethiopia is known as cradle of mankind? It was not until 1963 evidence presents finding of fossils, skeletons, and different tools that has been discovered in the Rift Valley regions. So as I mentioned earlier, the Rift Valley region used to be underground, but it's exposed when the rift is formed 2 million years ago. So everything which was under before that time exposed and easily available for the study of paleoanthropologies. Paleoanthropology is a discipline studies about the finding of remains, fossils, skeletons of our ancestors. So I'm sure most of you are familiar that the very famous hominid fossils discovered in Ethiopia in 1974 in a place called the Middle Awash River, a most complete hominid ever discovered in the history of mankind, Lucy. She is believed to be the ancestor, at least feeling the missing link on the study of evolution. So she's discovered by American, that time doctor, now a professor, Donald Johnson from Cleveland University, Ohio. He discovered this Lucy, and we Ethiopian prefer to call her Dinkinesh, though you are wonderful, meaning, but Donald Johnson and his team named her Lucy because by the time they discovered, they were listening the very famous Beatles song, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. So there has been a lot of additional findings are discovered in different parts of the country. So in Ethiopia, we have about 2 sites in the Rift Valley regions registered by UNESCO as World Heritage Sites for their abundant fossils and remnant that has been discovered in the region. You don't have to dig, it's exposed. So those areas are plenty abundant sources for fossils and skeletons and stone tools that has been used by our ancestors. So if I say this about the paleoanthropology and ancient hominids that has been discovered in Ethiopia in different parts, let me to give you some information about the civilization, like how a very complex societies start to live in the area. So by the approximately between 8 to 6 century BC before Christ, pastoralism and agricultural developments are started in the North, East Africa, as well as in Asia. As a result, population grows in that area and communication is advanced into a modern language. So by the time of the 7th century BC, peoples from the South Arabian Peninsula, which is the present Yemen, Saudi Arabia regions, start to migrate to the north parts of Ethiopia. So they are coming for different purpose, particularly trading and expansion. So the people who are coming from the South Arabian Peninsula start to intermarry with the indigenous inhabitants of that area. So by the 7th century BC, that is around 2,800 years, they establish a kingdom. And that kingdom is known as the Kingdom of Damat. So the Kingdom of Damat is mentioned in the Egyptian account because it was easy to find items like mirror, ivory, different kind of shells, including tortoise shells and elephant tusks. So trade relationship is very, very active. Trade relationship was very active between Egypt, as you can see, between Egypt and that time Kingdom of Yeha, which they mentioned land of Punt. Excuse me, are you asking me a question, sir?
No.
Okay, you can wait, and if there is any question, I'm ready to answer at the end of my presentation. And I'm sorry if I am take it too fast because I have a very limited time. That's why I'm sorry. So as you can see in the map, Egypt is in the upper, and the Blue Nile starts in Ethiopia at Lake Tana, and it goes all the way to Sudan, to Egypt. So they were using the Nile River for trade, as well as using the Red Sea coastal line. So Kingdom of Damat starts to decline around 3rd century BC because they changed the trade routes, because Damat is more inside, it is not close to the coastal line. So they further, Aksum is emerged. Aksum is believed to be emerged around 2nd century BC to 1st century AD. So among different cities and towns arose around that area, Aksum became predominant, and it became a very prominent kingdoms. And according to evidences, Aksum was one of the 4 great kingdoms of that time that are during that time: Rome, Persia, and China. So they have been, Aksum emerged as a kingdom and one of verifiable kingdom in the history of Ethiopia with abundant evidence. So the Aksumite Empire were using the port of Adolis. So where is this Aksumite Empire is now covering the present North Ethiopia, the entire Eritrea, parts of Sudan, and the Red Sea part, including the adjacent, the present Yemen and southern parts of Saudi Arabia. All these are incorporated as the kingdom of Aksum. So Aksum was served as a kingdom starting from, as I mentioned, 2nd century BC to 1st century AD until the 7th century AD. Their economy was depend on trade. So they were importing and exporting, and they are locating in the very important location that connect the Roman Empire to the Far East. They were using as melting pots where merchants are coming all over the world. And at some point, Greek was a language that they communicate for trade. And they have famous emperors and kings that ruled in Aksum. Among them, the very famous are King Izana and King Caleb. King Izana is the one who is converted to Christianity. So Ethiopia is the second country in the world adopt Christianity as a state religion next to Armenia in the 4th century. That is according to concrete evidence that is found in Aksum, archaeological findings, inscription of Izana. But there is another opinion by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Maybe you are familiar with an Ethiopian unique official made a journey to Jerusalem. It is mentioned in the book of Acts in the New Testament, chapter 8, that this eunuch was baptized by one of the disciples of Jesus, and he brought it back the religion and converted the royal family in the 1st century AD. That is according to religious source, but according to archaeological findings by the 4th century, Ethiopia is already converted to Christianity. And during the 5th centuries, the 9 saints came from Syria. They were invited by King Caleb to translate Bible from Greek and Hebrew into Ge'ez, a very ancient language in Ethiopia, now only used in the church, which is a language evolved from the Sabian language. So Adolis was the port they use for their import-export. And what makes Aksum to decline? So I will quickly mention a few things about why Aksum is declined. Aksum is declined as the rise of Islam in the Red Sea area. So Islam is raised in the 7th century. So the Islam controlled the Red Sea coastal line. So they control the trade routes. So because of that, Aksum could not able to perform further trade relationship with the rest of the world. So their economy is entirely declined. And internal reasons for the decline of Aksum is deforestation, plague, and famine, as well as tribes that were bring tributes are revolt against the empire. So they don't have any more items to export. Due to that, Aksum economy is affected highly. So they declined, and power is shifted to south of Aksum, called Roha or Lalibela. Okay, while I'm before I just mention about the emerging of the Zagway Dynasty, I would like to say something about the Queen of Shiba. I'm sure you are familiar with the word Queen of Shiba. So she's mentioned in different accounts. We Ethiopian believed that a Queen Shiba is a queen of that region before Aksum emerged as emperor and kingdoms. She ruled in the northern parts of Ethiopia. The Yemens also claim that she belongs to them, and they called her Queen Makeda. But evidence is more inclined that Queen Shiba is an Ethiopian queen, or that time Aksumite queen, but her territory is extending up to the South Arabian Peninsula, the present Yemen. So there is a very famous book in Ethiopia. We call it Kibra Negest, the Ethiopian Epic book, accounts of different emperors and kings ruling in Ethiopian history. So she's one of the queen ruling Ethiopia that is contemporary or the same time with King Solomon of Israel. That is 9th century BC. And she heard a lot about the king, and she decided to go and visit Solomon. So that story is recorded in the Old Testament in book of 1 King chapter 10. Also, it is mentioned in the 2nd Chronicle chapter 9 verse 1 and 2 about a queen made a journey to visit King Solomon. King Solomon accepted her with a big feast, welcomed her, and she gave him different gifts that she brought, as you can see in the photos. She brought different tusks, like elephant tusk, mirror, and gold. And in return, she wants wisdom from him. So he was answering all her questions. He answered all her questions. And as you know, King Solomon had 300 wives, I think 700 wives and 300 concubines. So he wants to have affairs with her. So according to the legend, they slept together, and she conceived a son called Minilik I. He is the founder of the Solomonic Dynasty in Ethiopia. So this is about Queen Shiba. And we have the Solomonic Dynasty. The Solomonic Dynasty is established by a son who is born from Queen of Shiba from Ethiopia and King Solomon of Israel. And by the time he arrived at maturity, age of 18-20, his mother sent him back to Israel to visit his father. And his father welcomed him and made a big feast welcoming his son, but other siblings of him were jealous because everyone was competing to have the throne of Solomon. So King Solomon said, why don't you go back to your country and establish a Solomonic dynasty? And he sent him back with 12,000 Israel, from each tribe 1,000. By the time he came, one of the first son of the Lewi tribe, his son brought with him the original Ark of the Covenant. So now it is believed too that the original Ark of the Covenant that God gave for Moses in Mount Sinai is residing in Ethiopia, in St. Mary Zion Church in Aksum. Okay, so you also are familiar about Beta Israels, or the Ethiopian Black Jews, the House of Israel. So this is how they came. So there are different kind of opinions or theories are given how these Ethiopian Jews happen to be in Ethiopia. The Ethiopian Jews are the only Black Jew that Israel accepts them as a Jew. So according to the theories given by different scholars, some of them are saying these 12,000 Israelis that come with Menelik I, the founder of King Solomon, and others are saying during the 6th century BC, before Christ, when the temple of Solomon was destroyed by Babylon, they were captive and taken to Babylon. So among the 12 tribes, one of the tribes, the Dan tribe, came taking the Ark of the Covenant, and they came through Egypt following the Nile course, and they came to Ethiopia. And other scholars are saying that later on in the 2nd century BC to 1st century AD, when Aksum is emerged as a kingdom, artisans, merchants, Jewish merchants, and craftsmen are coming, invited by the king of Aksum. So they start to live there. So these are all the different theories how the Jews are coming. Anyways, the biggest airlifting in the history of mankind happened later in 1990s, just before the overthrow of the communist regime. The Israel government came and took the Ethiopian Jews back to the promised land. I will come that later if I have time. So I already mentioned about the kingdom of Dharma. So these are one of the temple. The temple, as you can see on the very right top, is the temple of Yeha. So the kingdom of Dharma were stayed in a capital place called Yeha, which is still open for visitors. So it's a temple of moon. It's dedicated for god of moon called Almuka. And the other archaeological findings are incense burner and a sacrificial stones that are inscription of a very ancient language called Sabian. And the language, the widely speaking language we have now, the official language in Ethiopia is called Amharic, is evolved from the Sabian language. From the Sabian language, Ge'ez is evolved, and from Ge'ez, Amharic is evolved. And these are also artifacts, evidences of the achievements of the kingdom of Aksum. They were able to mint coins for exchanging trade. Besides the bartering system, exchanging commodities with commodities, they also able to mint coins from gold, silver, and bronze for their international trade. And down there in the you see the chapel where original Ark of the Covenant is believed to be kept, and obelisk or the stele of Aksum. This is registered by UNESCO as World Heritage Site because they are able to erect such a huge obelisks. While the Egyptian built their pyramids, the Aksumite kingdoms were able to erect this obelisk or steles. That is a mausoleum. Underground is a burial chamber, and upper is to show how they were expert in carving. So I am now coming to the Zagway Dynasty. As I mentioned, Aksum is declined because of internal and external factors, and power is shifted to the Zagway dynasties. The Zagway dynasties are not direct descendants of the Solomonic dynasty, but one of their generals from this area married the daughter of the last king of Aksum and shifted the capital to Roha, or the Zagway dynasties. So these Zagway dynasties were playing a lot of, compared to Aksum, they were relatively smaller in size because they haven't had any long trade relation with that time powers, but they still maintain short distance international trade. But they mostly dedicated their time in promoting the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. So to get acceptance by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, because they are not legitimate to take the power, they started to create a second Jerusalem in the land of Ethiopia. Remember, this time the Middle East were controlled by Saladin, like Jerusalem and Israel was controlled by Arabs, and pilgrims were not able to travel to pay their respect and pray to Jerusalem. So the Zagway dynasties decided to carve out 11 rock-hewn churches from a living rock. So here it's not a building. Some of you have been to Lalibela, I'm sure, so you know how it looks like. So they carved 11 rock-hewn churches from just a mountain, carving out. So they are carving from top to bottom. Once they are making the rock, they start to make windows and doors, and it is amazing. And it is registered by UNESCO as World Heritage Site. So the Aksum, the Zagway dynasty relatively were in a peaceful time. So they were working more in the culture, in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And I think around 12, they ruled over 200 years. So around 1268 or 70, another legitimate king claimed that descendants of the Aksumite emperor claim the throne. And Ethiopian Orthodox Church plays a vital role in a peaceful transition of power from the Zagway dynasty to the Solomonic dynasty. And we call it that historically the restoration of the Solomonic dynasty. So that is under some criteria. The Zagway dynasty to remain autonomous. They will rule their own areas. So the Solomonic dynasty is restored by a king named called Yukunu Amlak. Yukunu Amlak is the first king who reigned restoring the Solomonic dynasty in the history of Ethiopia. Okay, while I'm continuing about the history, I want to say something about coffee. I'm sure you are familiar about Ethiopian coffee. Coffee is a very important beverage drink in the Ethiopian history. Even coffee is first discovered in Ethiopia. Can you believe that? Coffee is first discovered in Ethiopia by a shepherd boy. So coffee is first discovered in the west parts of the country in a place called Kaffa. Maybe the name coffee is derived from the place where coffee was discovered in Kaffa. So unfortunately, when after coffee is discovered, it was introduced to the rest of the world through the trade routes that the Arabs are using. So now in the world, it is known as coffee Arabica because it was introduced to the rest of the world through the Muslims trade route. So it's called coffee Arabica. But Ethiopia is one of the best coffee producing countries in the world. So for those of you who never tasted the coffee of Ethiopia, I suggest you to try some. So now I'm coming to the Christian versus Muslim kingdoms war. That is the 16th century. So the Solomonic Dynasty were ruling in the central parts of the country, the present Addis Ababa area. We call it Shewa. So they were ruling for more than 200 years. And they were forcefully incorporate the Muslim sultanates of that area to pay them tribute. But in 1529, officially the war between the Christian and Muslim kingdoms started. Most people think when we mentioned about a war between Christian and Muslim kingdoms, they think it's a religious war. No, that's not the fact. It is rather a war of controlling the trade route and to become prominent in economy. So the Muslim sultanates decide, no, we are not paying any tribute for the Christian kingdoms. And the Christian kingdoms said, okay, if you are not paying us a tribute, then we will declare war. So this war finally reached to its climax, and the Muslims were supported by the Ottoman Turks, and the Christians were supported by the Portuguese. So it became an international war because the Ottoman wants an ally in the Horn of Africa as well as the Portuguese. So the war took place between 1529 to 1543. So the Ethiopian emperor was killed by a very famous Muslim warrior, Ahmed Ibrahim, or nicknamed Ahmed the Left-Handed. He controlled most of the central and northern parts of the country, and he burned a lot of churches and Christian shrines. So the Christian amalgamated their power and supported by the Portuguese. They marched again on the Muslim and they defeated the Muslim invader in 1543. So when the Christian and Muslim kingdoms are fighting, there was a power vacuum in the central parts of the country. So the Oromo ethnic group, now the largest ethnic group we have in Ethiopia, easily able to occupy most of the central parts of the country because the Christian and Muslim kingdoms were engaging in a full-scale war. It was a vacant. It was easy for the Oromos to move from the present northern Kenya and southern Ethiopia part to the middle part. And it is called the movement. Some scholars say migration of the Oromo. So now a new era is happening. So after a very bloodshedding and long war, both the Christian and Muslim kingdoms are retreating to the Muslim retreat to the east parts of the country. Now a place called Harar. They built also a walled city of Harar registered by UNESCO as World Heritage Site. And the Christians are retreating to the Lake Tana region. Lake Tana is a lake, official source of the Blue Nile. So the central part was easily occupied by the Oromos. And later on, I will come the influence of the Oromos coming into these central parts of the country. So the Christian kingdoms are maintaining in the northern parts of the country. Then in 1632, a new dynasty is emerging. A Christian northern dynasty is emerging, the same descendant of the Solomonic Dynasty. And it is called the Gondaran period. The Gondaran period. Gondar is a beautiful town located 700 kilometers north of Addis Ababa. And you can see here a very beautiful castle. And it's called as Camelot of Africa because it is unusual to see castle in Africa, but we have them here. How it happens, it's very intriguing because, as I mentioned earlier, the Christian kingdoms were supported by the Portuguese. So, son of Vasco da Gama, the very famous explorer, son, Cristobal da Gama, leading the 400 musketeers, the one who is supporting the Christian kingdoms, after the war, the Portuguese didn't left, they stay behind and they start to live with the locals, excuse me. So instead of leaving the country, they stay behind. They start married the locals, start to live. So when they are coming from Portuguese, they were also in India, Goa. So among the 400 musketeers, some of them are India, some of them are Moorish, some of them are Portuguese. So when the king Fasilides came to power, that is in 1632, he ordered to be built such a grand castle. So the Ethiopians, including the Ethiopians craftsmen, are integrated with this, the left musketeers or soldiers who start to build this beautiful castle. And the early Gondaran period is considered as a glorious time of the Gondaran time, from 1632 to 1712, because the three kings that ruled in the Gondaran time, that is Fasilides, his son Johannes, and his grandson Iyasu, were devoted themselves in the development of culture, music, literature, construction, and relatively a very peaceful era, because they were peaceful. Everyone was allowed to worship his God, because still now in Gondar we have areas that is designated for Muslim settlers and Ethiopian Jew settlers and Ethiopian Orthodox. So they were flourishing in that area. And Gondar also used as a trade center for inland trade between the neighboring Sudan and even up to Egypt. But they were dedicated and devoting their time in building castles. But unfortunately, after the glorious time of Gondar, they start to control the power. So Gondar glory is no more existed. They start to decline. So it started the era of princes, or Zamana Masafant. So the era of princes is known for a lot of plot, sabotage, and killing, poisoning each other. So it stayed until from 1750s until 1812. It was considered as the era of princes, or the Zaman Masafen. And over here you see a very charismatic guy who is called Kasa. His name was Kasa, and he's born from a noble family in the lowlands of Gondar, and he's gathering other men, and he started his own small kind of kingdom, and he started to revolt. He became rebel against the regional lords, and he started to campaign and defeat different regional lords, because this era of princes is the lose of power in the central part. Regional lords become more powerful, and they are the one who is making kings and queens, but the kings that are on the throne are just puppets. Rather, the regional lords were having the real power. So this Kasa Hailu, later crowned as Emperor Theodros II, culminated the Zaman Masafen. He campaigned and incorporated different parties as to pay tribute for him. So in 1855, I think it's in 1855, he became Emperor Theodros II. He's a very, how can I say? He's a very ambitious emperor, wants to modernize and improve his military. So he started a very serious relationship with the European powers, including the Emperor Victoria of England. He asked for assistance, he asked for support to modernize his army, asking the foreigners coming to visit him to build him a modern weapon like a cannon, rifles. So he asked for assistance from British, but Queen Victoria were not instant, or she didn't respond for his request. So he imprisoned some of the British nationalities and also missionaries coming. So Queen Victoria sent a troop to help releasing these missionaries, and this time he insists not to release them. So they were supported by another regional lord, who is Johannes, a regional king of Tigray. He assisted the British troop in bring them where this Emperor Theodros is stationed. So it was a very bloodshedding war between his troops and the British troop. Finally, they could not handle it because the British came with modern weapon and bigger troops. So before they captured him, he killed himself. He makes suicide. So the British took his only son back to London, first to Nairobi, then London, by Captain Napier. And this time, when Emperor Theodros is killed, who comes is Johannes, the regional lords of Tigray, declare himself Emperor of Ethiopia. So he tried to defeat the Mahdists, the invaders from Sudan, who are coming to invade Ethiopia from their side, the present Gondar region. He went there and during action he died. So there was no that big regional lord that able to unify the Ethiopia. So this time we have Menelik. Menelik is a regional lord whose his ancestors were ruling in the Shawa region, in the central part. The present Addis Ababa and the surrounding areas are called the Shawa. So he is born from royalties. His father was Haile Melekot, and his grandfather is Sahale Selassie. So they both were ruling the central parts of the country, and they were living peacefully with the neighboring Muslim sultanates. So relatively they were stronger because they didn't wasted their resources for war with their neighbors. So he declared himself emperor of Ethiopia. That is in 1889. 1889, Menelik became emperor of Ethiopia. Before that, he was king of Shawa, only a certain small area in the central parts of the country. So what is another important thing here is the Battle of Adwa. The Battle of Adwa is a victory of Black nation, where Pan-Africanism is emerged in the mind of Africans. So what's happening in the 18th centuries, in the 18th and 19th centuries is about the Scramble of Africa. Europeans are competing to control Africa. So this is known in history as the Scramble of Africa. The Scramble of Africa was initiated by Bismarck, King of Germany, and they were make a treaty to divide Africa into British, France, Belgium, Germans. So Italy is emerging in the Scramble of Africa very late, after most of the places were occupied or controlled by the British and the French. So first the Italian came and stationed in the coastal line in the present Eritrea, port of Misawa. They were occupying that part because the competition between British and France is climax. It was in it is highest level. So the British first invited the Italian to control the parts of Ethiopia and parts of Somalia, because British is using Italian as a watchdog to look after those areas. Instead of France came and control, British preferred the Italian to come and to control that area. So later on, the Italian developed an interest to control further to the inside of Ethiopia. So they first make a treaty with Emperor Menelik, saying that it's called the Treaty of Uchale. It's called a Treaty of Uchale signed between Emperor Menelik of Ethiopia and the Italian. They said there is a trick. The treaty was both in Amharic, Ethiopian language, and in Italian. So the Italian version of the treaty says that for any international communication Ethiopia has to use Italy. It's a must. But the Amharic version says if Ethiopia wants. So the Italian version is putting Ethiopia under the protectorate of Italy. So Menelik find out the trick or the sabotage that the Italian trying. So he was waiting 2 years until they harvest enough food and galvanizing and gathering his warriors. So Italian was underestimating Menelik. They only sent 35,000 troops. Menelik marched with 100,000 warriors. So the Battle of Ottawa happened in 1896, May the 1st. So Emperor Menelik played an important role in spying them before and controlling the high ground. Then what happened? Ethiopia defeated the Italians in the Battle of Ottawa. And it is a very stunning victory for African nation. Start to believe that an African who is considered as a backward primitive nation able to defeat the European power. So the Italian, they don't had any option. So they accept their defeat and sign another treaty, and they still remain in parts of Ethiopia, the now Eritrean part. So the Italians were very angry and waited for revenge Ethiopians. So Italy came and invaded Ethiopia during Second World War. So Ethiopia is the only country in Africa never been colonized, but it's occupation. There is a difference between colonization and occupation. So year 1936, Mussolini sent a bigger and a huge army to invade Ethiopia, and they were using poison gas, killing Ethiopian warriors and patriots, and they control major cities in Ethiopia. So for 5 years, they occupied most parts of Ethiopia. It's called occupation. So the Italians combined Ethiopia and the Somali parts of Italy and Eritrea as East Africa Italian occupation was ruled for about 4.5 years, but they were not peaceful. The Ethiopian guerrilla fighters were continuously fighting and killing the troops of the Italian. So during the breakout of the Second World War, Britain accepted Ethiopia as a full ally. And during these 5 years, Emperor Haile Selassie was in exile in Italy, in England, in England. So the Allied force came through Sudan and finally defeat the Italian army that occupied parts of the country in 1941. So in 1941, Emperor Haile Selassie back to Ethiopia and control the throne. And let me say something about the very famous emperor. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Ethiopian emperor Haile Selassie. His name was Tafari Makonnen, but when a king is becoming a king or coming on the throne, they change name. So his name, Haile Selassie, is his crown name, which means power of the Trinity. So he's a very important figure in the modern history of Ethiopia. He ruled for more than, I would say, he ruled for 58 years in total. He was first came as regent for the daughter of Menelik, and he ruled with her from 1916 to 1930. Then when the daughter of Menelik died, he controls the absolute power and he crowned as Emperor Haile Selassie, power of the Trinity, and he ruled from 1930 to 1974 for 44 years, absolute power. Of course, his reign was disrupted during the Italian occupation from 1936 to 1941. So he plays a very important role in the establishment of Organization of African Union. He's the one who abolished slave trade in Ethiopia. He's the one, Ethiopia is the only country in Africa in the League of Nations before the establishment of the United Nations. And he has been here in the United States few times, as you can see on the photo with John F. Kennedy. They were a good friend. And there is a library in Ethiopian oldest university, Addis Ababa University, dedicated to John F. Kennedy Library because it was funded by the Kennedy Foundation. So on the photo, you see a very famous African figures who played an important role in the establishment of Organization of African Union, Nkrumah of Ghana and Jomo Kenyatta, who is the father of the present Kenyan president. So Haile Selassie is considered as a good, at the same time, bad king in the history of Ethiopia, because there are a number of nice things. He played an important role in modernizing Ethiopia, and he was also criticized for holding power for such a long period of time. So he was overthrown or deported by his own bodyguard in 1974. Okay, after the overthrow of the monarch, the last monarch, a communist regime is emerging in Ethiopia. And on the photo, as you can see, the chairman of Mengistu Haile Mariam and Fidel Castro are seen in the photos. So, as I said earlier, it became very difficult for the Ethiopians to live during the 1950s, 1960s. Only royal families or highborn people who have a direct contact with Haile Selassie are benefiting the economy. They control the trade, everything. So student violence or like student unrest, protests started in Addis Ababa universities, and they are asking for a reformation in the country. But Haile Selassie was not paying enough attention. Instead of answering the critical questions of the people, he was spending his most precious time enjoying, celebrating big birthdays. And the first big famine happened in the country in end of 1960s or beginning of 1970s, when Haile Selassie still he was in power. So finally, his bodyguard, led by Mengistu Haile Mariam, make the coup d'etat. That was not the first time. Earlier in 1950s, two brothers tried to make a coup d'etat, but a coup, but which was not successful. But it became successful in 1974. So the emperor was overthrown by the bodyguards, and a new communist or socialist regime or power is controlling the country, Marxist. So Ethiopia long years relationship with the United States is in, and a new agreement or a new relationship Ethiopia started with former USSR. So it became a communist country. But just after, okay, just after the communist regime came to power, the country became in a constant turmoil. For instance, one of the general who was fully participate in the coup, named Tafari Ben. Excuse me. Can you see me? Hello? I don't know, it was disconnected for time being.
I can see you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay.
She says she can see you.
She can see me, huh? I'm sorry.
I can see everybody, but not your shared screen.
What about now?
Yes, all of you.
Okay, excuse me. 1 second. My shared screen. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm here. Okay. Thank you. So in 1917, one of the general who was participated in the coup d'etat and the coup of the overthrow of the emperor was killed. And a very famous incident in Ethiopia happened from 1977 to 1979, which is called the Qai Shibir or Red Terrorist. This is like orchestrated by Mengistu. He is killing more than 100,000 educated, like bright-minded young who are against him. He was killing them. He is killing more than 100,000 students, university professors who are against him. He is organizing this campaign called Red Terrorist, and he killed more than 100, even more than that, he was killing. And in 1977, because of the internal turmoil and political competition, it created a very good opportunity for Somalia to invade Ethiopia. So Somalia invaded Ethiopia in 1977. And in 1978, after a year, Ethiopia defeated Somalia with the help of former Soviet Union and Cuba, give a lot of support in terms of ammunition and also army. Ethiopia able to defeat Somalia. And I would say the next major historical event happened in the country is between 1984 to 1985 is a famous and a very heartbreaking famine and droughts in Ethiopia. The drought and famine that killed more than 1 million Ethiopians. And are you familiar with the very famous concert that very famous American and European singers, including Michael Jackson and Bob Geldof, were singing on a concert to gather relief for Ethiopians who are in the drought? So the problem happening during that time was Ethiopia was in a civil war. The communist regime was continuously having war. The TPLF, the Tigray People Revolutionary Party, and other guerrilla fighters, because he was the communist regime was suppressing the different parts of the country. So it was not that easy to deliver the relief for the famine and drought areas. So it is a big catastrophe and one of the darkest history we have in the history of Ethiopia. Then in 1887, the Mengistu became a chairman of the Workers' Party. He became the president of Ethiopia. And next year in 1988, Ethiopia and Somalia signed a peace treaty. Then after a long 17 years war, Mengistu was defeated. In 1991, he fled to Zimbabwe because all the small fighters are joining and become one big army, and they defeated the communist regime, their troops, in 1991. And Ethiopian People Revolutionary Democratic Front captured in Ethiopia in May 1, 1991. Then in May, few months after, I think in 92, they discovered the dead body of Haile Selassie under the office of Mengistu, and reburied again in one of the cathedral in Ethiopia. And the other major historical event we have is Ethiopian War with Eritrea. In 1993, Eritrea referendum and become independent nation. Eritrea used to be one province in Ethiopia, but in 1993, after the collapse of the communist regime, they declare independence by referendum, and Eritrea became independent country. Later on, after, I would say, from 1993 to 1999, 7 years later, there was conflict and turmoil in the border between Ethiopia and Eritrea. And in end of 1999 and 2000, Ethiopia and Eritrea enter into a full-scale war to control some parts. Eritrea claimed that parts of Ethiopia in the north is belonging to me. So the war happened for more than 1.5 years, and a lot of casualties happened in the country. Then the United Nations peacekeeping force came and controlled these dispute areas for more than 5 years. And in 2002, they came to an agreement in Algiers. So the part that Eritrea claimed is to be given to Eritrea, but Ethiopia was saying, I'm not gonna give that land. So the border were closed for more than 20 years. So after that, Ethiopia was considered as Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, but it was a one party. There was a lot of demonstration and human rights cases are happening because a lot of journalists, political leaders were imprisoned between 2005 to 2016. And state of emergency has been declared a few times. And in 2018, as you can see in the slide, a young prime minister is elected, Abiy Ahmed, who wins the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize for his achievement peace between Ethiopia and Eritrea. once he came to power, he's trying to solve the problem. But there has been layers and layers of problem before he's coming to power. So he quickly do restoring the peace between the neighboring country, Eritrea. And for that, the Nobel Prize Peace of 2019 is granted for him for solving more than 20 years dispute between the neighboring country, Ethiopia and Eritrea. And after that, he made a lot of reformation, including widening the political space, inviting all political opponents that has been fighting in the neighboring countries. And he is the first prime minister who select 50% of his cabinet ministers are women. Our president is woman, and he's also now working on the building of the Grand Renaissance Dam. It was started during the time of the previous Prime Minister Meles Zenawi, because Ethiopia is one of developing country and our economy is not stable, and we need electric power. So the cheapest way of generating electric power is through hydroelectric power. Most of our rivers are flowing in a deep gorges, so it is very suitable to produce a hydroelectric power. So we are starting this big project, mega project of building the Great Renaissance Dam very close to the border of Sudan. And currently we are having a big political disputes and turmoils with neighboring countries, Sudan and Egypt, because they are afraid that their annual flow of the water will be reduced because of the dam. So there is now currently happening the three countries, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt, are making a lot of discussions so that this dam will not affect the flow of the water to the downstreams, because it's obvious that the livelihood of the Egyptian is entirely depend on Nile. So Ethiopia contributes 85% of the Blue Nile. So our intention is, Ethiopia intention is a very pure and honest, because we are not using the water for irrigation or other purpose. It's just to rotate the turbine so that we can produce enough electric power so that we can give electric for the rural areas and build different industries, because the economy of the country is still depend in a very subsistence agriculture. So this is it. And I'm sorry, because of time, I could not able to go deeper and deeper into each of the topics I try to cover, but this is it. This is what I have for today. But if you are interested, I can talk about specific parts of the history we have been. We try to cover this time: the culture, the music, the food. So thank you very much for watching and attending my presentation. Now, if you have any question, I'm ready to try to answer your question. Thank you very much.
Well, I'd like to just say, I thought this was outstanding, and it didn't look as if it was recorded, but I wanted to know if it was recorded so that I can share it with people. And I would definitely be interested in a subsequent session where you go more into detail with, one topic.
That would be my pleasure. I think it's recorded. The library is recording the presentation. So as I said, I try to cover like thousands of history just in 1.5 hours. I know that sometimes I have to jump part of it. So I can come with like only about Aksum or the rock churches of Lalibela or the movement of the Oromo peoples during the 16th century. So it's my pleasure to give another presentation. Thank you very much. Okay, no other question or comment? Okay, so thank you very much and see you soon. Thank you for
Thank you
following.
very much.
Thank you very much. Okay.